So we're going to start off kickstarting your year with self-compassion and mindfulness. And again, it's myself, Alexandra James-Okochi, and my colleague, Jennifer Johnson. Hi, Wilhelmina from Jackson, Mississippi.
Monique, if you want to go to everyone, Alex will go over it.
Yep, I was about to just say, so these are the ways to engage. When you're ready to speak, which we hope you will, please raise your hand and we'll ask you to unmute yourself, and feel free to type comments in the group chat. So all you have to do is kind of type where it says host and panelists, do the drop down and make sure that it's going to everyone. And also we ask that you're a little patient with us, because when you're typing in the chat, sometimes it all comes really fast. Hi, Deanna and Clay from DC Family Success Centers, welcome. And the agreement. So for those, if this is your first time, we operate under these agreements to make sure that we have a great experience, but also to make sure that there is mutual sharing and learning. So we want to speak from our own experience, use I statements. We operate under the golden rule. We treat people the way that we would like to be treated. We ask you to bring your full presence, no multitasking. And if you need a minute, of course, just take a minute. If you agree to these agreements, please type I agree in the chat. Thank you. I see people already typing in the chat. Hi, Christina. So next slide.
Okay, so to get going, as you know, we're going to be talking about New Year's resolutions in the context of mindfulness and self-compassion. So we're going to do a few context slides first, and then we'll get to some questions. But if at any time something speaks to you and you would like to talk about something, feel free to raise your hand or to put something in the chat when we're going over context as well. But this first slide here is about New Year's resolutions, and we found one study, and in that study, only about 12% of people who made New Year's resolutions felt that they were successful in achieving those goals. And some of the most common resolutions include losing weight, sticking to a healthier diet, exercising regularly, making better financial choices, quitting smoking, and spending more time with family. So only 12% of those were kept. But while people don't necessarily feel like they're achieving those goals, there's some good news. According to another study published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology, those who set New Year's resolutions are 10 times more likely than those that don't to actually change their behavior with those yearly goals. So that's something to think about with New Year's resolutions. Next slide, please.
And so, we all go through this thing where we make these resolutions like the data said before, and then we break the resolutions and beat ourselves up. And then we say we're going to try again. And then by like February, a lot of times, I know I'm guilty of this. I'm just like, oh, forget it. It's just not going to happen. And we were talking about this webinar with our colleague, Robin Harvey, and she, shared a journey she had been on around self-compassion. So she gave us this resource. And it's really interesting. It was like, that self-compassion is acting the same way towards yourself when you're having a difficult time, you fail, notice something you don't like about yourself. And instead of just ignoring the pain and getting all like stiff and upset about it and focusing on it, you just tell yourself that this is really difficult right now. And how can you care for yourself in the moment? And so this is from selfcompassion.org. And what was really neat is that the woman who her name escapes me right now, who is responsible for this website, talked about three different elements of self-compassion. And the first one was self-kindness versus self-judgment. And so as a part of self-compassion, it's about being warm and understanding for, towards ourselves. A lot of times, we can practice self-compassion for other people and empathy for other people, but we tend to be hard on ourselves. I know this is true for all human beings, but as a woman, I feel like sometimes because of our responsibilities and the superwoman kind of mythos that's out there. We tend to do this a little bit more, just always having to do everything. And then we don't do something, it's like, oh, it's horrible. So having self-kindness versus self-judgment, and it's being able to make sure that we accept that it's okay that things are going to be imperfect, and that we are gentle with ourselves when we fall short of our ideals, and know that, we can't be great all the time. We can't get what we want all the time. And sometimes we all fall short, right? Like that Bible verse. So the reality is that with sympathy and kindness, and greater emotional support of ourselves, when that's experienced, the self-compassion actually helps us reboot to actually achieve the things that we want to do. The second element in self-compassion is common humanity versus isolation, which basically means like we're not alone, right? So it's not that we're the only ones falling short of our New Year's resolutions, or we're the only ones falling short that we didn't get all the things on our task list done in a day, as if we could actually do that, right? That's why it's like we have to prioritize, and then being able to understand that common humanity, that we all fall short, we all fail sometimes, and it's okay. One of the lines that I really liked in this, in the explanation of these three elements, was that the very definition of being human means that one is mortal, vulnerable, and imperfect. And I think vulnerability is an attribute of being authentic, but a lot of times we don't connect that because there's so much pressure in society for us to be perfect. And, quite honestly, with my daughters, I'm starting to see that pressure to be perfect because of social media even more pervasive in society. So self-compassion involves that suffering and personal inadequacy, feeling perfect, personally inadequate is just a part of the shared human experience. And so when something goes wrong, instead of being like it happens to me alone, understand that it's happened to part of being a part of humanity, and that's okay. Be okay with that. And then the third one was mindfulness over versus over identification. And so it's about having this balanced approach, right? With all of the self-help, sometimes it's all about let's be positive. And if you be positive, there's nothing's gonna ever happen negative. And that's just kind of like, to me, living in la la land, because the reality is we live in a world that has positive and negative. And so it's not about the positive and negative, it's how we view it and how we choose to use that. So in this self-compassion approach, it's like, don't not feel your negative feelings. Don't over identify with them, but don't not feel them, because the only way to feel the shortcomings, to feel the negative, in order to get past the feel the negative emotions or the disappointments or what we think are failures, because quite honestly, we know that our biggest failures are also our greatest lessons, is that being in a space where you're non-judgmental of yourself and what you perceive as negative thoughts and behaviors, and being receptive and listening and observing those thoughts, and not trying to suppress them or not trying to deny them, but at the same time making sure that once we feel it and feel our pain, that we then exercise this compassion for ourselves, which I think is a great way to get past whatever we're experiencing. And that's what they're saying about being like over identifying with them. So it's not staying in a place of just, oh, I'm going to ignore the negativity or ignore how I'm feeling at the moment and push through and think positive, because, suppression is not good. But I feel them, I experience them, figure out the lesson, be present, and then let me try to move on and learn the lesson.
I really like that third point, because it really makes that distinction between like focusing so hard on something where you feel you've let yourself down or let someone else down and then ignoring it. It's like mindfulness is helping you kind of, like you said, sit with it. And that is something that I hadn't really thought about in a while. And I think all of these elements of self-compassion, personally for me, are like very important for mental health these days and always. And I also wanted to point out, Andrew did put in the chat, her name's Dr. Kristen Neff, who
yes.
publishes on this website. And hi, Glenda.
Hi, Glenda. And you know, something that you were saying, Jennifer, like, because it's so easy to fall victim to not being present in the moment, like, and suppressing it. And it's just like, I feel this way, I'm just going to move past it. And I think a lot of times when you brought up the mental health component, I think a lot of times it is damaging because if you're not dealing with it and being mindful and being in the moment, and, one, by doing that, you're just learning to be in the moment and be present with yourself. But suppression is not good. And we usually tend to go to these extremes. And
Right.
so I
And
think that's the
neither
thing.
extreme is helpful, but when you kind of can sit with and confront that discomfort, there's an opportunity for growth.
And it makes me think too that if you're doing this practice of self-compassion, I could see by being patient and loving and compassionate with yourself, it can only increase your empathy and compassion for other people.
Yes, totally. It's very holistic. So I think that brings us to the next slide, which is giving a little bit of background on mindfulness. And we have taken a bit of a definition from mindful.org. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness suggests that the mind is fully attending to what's happening and to what you're doing in the space you're moving through. Okay, that might seem not very important at the moment, but we often are not paying attention to what we're doing in the present moment, it says we so often veer from the matter at hand. Our mind takes flight, we lose touch with our body, and pretty soon we're engrossed in obsessive thoughts about something that just happened or fretting about the future, which makes us anxious. So mindfulness is a basic human ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we're doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. And that definition has a lot of little parts. I think you can go ahead, Andrew. Oh, sorry. I thought there was another thing on there. Can we go back? My bad. So part of that definition, the last part especially speaks to me, not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us, because when we're mindful, instead of just having a reaction or reacting, we can kind of pause and create a new path instead of just doing what's automatic to us that might not be helpful. We can take a pause, think about it, be present, and create a new path forward that might be more helpful to us, with that awareness of what's going on around us.
And you think when you think about meditation, and one of the things they tell you, right, when you're meditating is to be present, or when you're in the process of trying to like rewire your brain and control your thoughts. I would dare say, and this is my own social science stats, right, from experience, most of the things that we worry about is either in the past or in the future. Those are the things that we obsess. What if this happened? Or when something happened, I should have said this, or they could have done this. And you could just go down this spiral, and you're so busy in the past or so busy in the future that you're not really living in the moment, and you're like super distracting yourself from living life, especially if you go too far, which I've had this experience, like too far down the rabbit hole. You can look up, and I know that this happens to me sometimes with my Gemini mind. I go so far down the rabbit hole, like so much time could go by, and you just miss, like an hour could go by because you think that you're trying to solve the problem, but you really like the gerbil in the wheel, just going over and over and over. And physically, you're causing stress to your body, releasing cortisol to your body. And we know out of all the things that can, affect our health, stress is one of the biggest things. So being, present and shifting your perspective is not only good for our mental health, but our physical health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just knowing, and I'm trying to sit with this right now and be mindful of what all this means, kind of, it's like a world inside a world. We're talking about it and I'm trying to do it in my head. And what I'm thinking is that this is a practice, this resolutions, because we do make resolutions, we make goals in general. Some of us do. I haven't yet this year, but we'll get to that. But it is a practice, and our physical bodies and our non-physical bodies, we have wired them a certain way by practicing these things. So to be self-compassionate about our mindfulness practice as well.
Definitely, because it takes, the anywhere from, they say, 30 to 90 days to create a habit. And so if that's the case, it's constantly trying to replace those negative thoughts after you set with them with the positive. And it takes time. And I think I've said this before. I always, liken it to improvisational rapping, which is called freestyling. Like, you suck in the beginning. You really suck. And if you give up, you'll never get good. But what happens is, the more you practice freestyling, the shorter the space closes for you to think of something else, and then it's like automatic. And I think that's what helped me figure out how to rewire my brain. Like, I'm going to keep falling, I'm going to keep sounding crazy, I'm going to say what all of that, and then those things get replaced to where the words are just coming. And I think that's what's helped me try to, at least the level I am, if it ever work, right, but to replace the overbearing of thinking the negative, if this could happen and if that could happen. So
I love that analogy. That is really cool. And I'm so glad that we're talking about mindfulness and self-compassion in relation to these resolutions. So let's talk about more how to set our resolutions.
So, a mindful guide to New Year's resolution. This is from the leftbrainbuddha.com. First one is consider your intentions, the why that you're doing it. And I think number 2 is the one that resonates the most in creating any kind of new habit, is to focus on the process and the results, right? And anytime you're on a weight loss journey, they tell you don't look at the scale every day, right? Like, just do the work, go to the gym, eat the right way, because if you focus on the results, again, in our microwave society, it's not happening quick enough, and then you just give up.
And you don't have a path to get there either. If you're only looking at the goal or the resolution, it's not the actual steps. What are those things that are going to help you? Who are those people that are going to support you? It's kind of, you need to have a more holistic version of a resolution than just, I would like to lose 10 pounds, or I want to have a degree by the end of the year. Okay, what's my first step? Second step?
And under the process and not the results within the article, they talked about that studies have shown that employees who are successful sales executives, when they focus on process and style instead of sales numbers and speed, they actually perform better. Right. So instead of they're saying focus on I have to lose weight, just again, focus on eating right, focus on going for walks, and one step at a time, one day at a time, which leads us into this change in your habit loop, right? The habits that we have of not doing stuff, we've been doing that for how long? So it's going to take that much longer to rechange the habit loop that we're already in, which is why we go back to this piece about being compassionate, and how there's this similarity in here where they were saying, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself for the not, cheating and eating the snack that you're not supposed to eat. All right, I ate it. It's good. It was good. It's not good for me. Let me get back on the wagon and start again. And then consider, which I really like this, resolution alternatives. So instead of I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, it's just make the vision board and have it visible. It's choose a word for the year. Maybe the word is manifest. So maybe whatever it is. Andrew just said the word of the year for me is it will not be 2021. Let's hope so. It's feeling like it. The other thing, instead of, and this is something when I was talking to our CEO, Kathy, about, instead of calling it resolutions because of all the negative connotations, just say I'm setting intentions, right? Which goes to the power of manifesting. I'm setting these intentions for the year, because ultimately, right, New Year's resolutions about growth and improvement. And so we want to bring these things into our lives. It says health here, joy and ease, but whatever it is, it may be, being more intentional with your finances. Whatever it is, it's about making it easier for ourselves and us getting to the point where we feel like we are walking in our highest self and doing the self-love that we need. So the mindfulness can bring awareness to our habits and hold ourselves with this compassion and kindness, which is really the key to actually have not checked off resolutions, but actual transformations.
Yes, transformational. Yeah, I really like that. And it really feels like mindfulness is so much more like, for example, these two examples, the vision board or the word of the year. Those both seem so mindful to me, because with a vision board, you have to create it. There's a process. With that creative process, you might internalize it in different ways that are different than just writing something down or thinking about it or typing it in a list, kind of like our standard to-do list, right? Or choosing the word of the year, it's something to go back to. So if you choose any word, like let's say tranquility, like that for me would be a place to come back to and help me be mindful of what I want that kind of feeling going forward to be. I like
Yeah,
those a
I
lot.
really like that. And in the vision boards, it's definitely proven to like hit your subconscious mind. I have this and I think I talked about it before. I don't know, we've been doing this for a while, but there's like electronic vision board apps.
Ooh.
And my subliminal vision board is the one that I use. And it actually, once you make the vision board, you watch it and set timers, and it blinks all of the pictures on and off, kind of like how they do in a scary movie, which is weird. But they blink because what it's doing is putting those images into your subconscious mind. And I have definitely manifested things based on the vision board and having it constantly. And then it's easy because you're just looking at it versus I would like to lose weight, or I am. And I love the I am statements. I'm not saying that, but we know as human beings, when we involve more of our senses, it's more of a way for things to actually manifest and happen. And then
Yes,
the
manifesting.
word piece is powerful. I've never done that. But I like that idea because that's an easy way to program your mind. It's almost like, the mantra piece for meditation to get your mind back to the center.
Yes.
So we can go to the next slide. And I think we are getting close to our
Yeah,
conversation.
this is actually something I just found recently. So we kind of put this together for you at the last minute. It's an Instagram post by a woman. Her handle is the holistic psychologist, and her name is Dr. It's also eluding me right now. But I'm sure Andrew can be real quick with that. So what she said in this post was, no matter what messages are pushed in our culture or in our media, resist all urges to make big resolutions. Your brain is not designed to keep them. And so thank you, Dr. Nicole LaPera. And she has a really good book called Doing the Work that I just started recently. And it's all about kind of reprogramming and really connecting the brain and all of the other things that maybe mainstream mental health doesn't pay a lot of attention to right now. Okay, so she says your brain is not designed to keep them. We make New Year resolutions with good intention, but without understanding the brain, we set ourselves up for failure. So here we really setting these intentions, these resolutions, if we don't understand what's going to go on inside our bodies and in the realm that we are working in, then we may be setting ourselves up to not keep those resolutions. When we make resolutions that are too far off from our current habits, our brain feels like it's in danger. Resolutions like, I'll go to the gym every day when you've never been consistent, or I'll do a 30-minute meditation daily, or I'm going to lose 30 pounds, send the brain into fear mode because they're too far from our familiar life experience. So we're basically doing something that's the opposite of what we want to be doing, and sending ourselves into that stress mode, even though the intention is to improve and help ourselves feel better. Without knowing how to do this the right way, we can actually cause more harm. So true transformation takes place through small daily promises that you know you can 100% keep. For example, drink a glass of water every day, meditate for 5 minutes, wake up 10 minutes early, read five pages of a book daily, journal for 5 minutes, etc. This will restore self-trust, and because the changes are small, the brain will not act as if it's in a threatening situation. I think that's really powerful because these small things that we might already do every day, maybe sometimes we don't. I know I could go, if I get too engrossed in work or something else, I might go a whole day without drinking water, which is terrible. But also on a normal day, I know I'll drink water. So just that one glass of water a day and saying, yes, I can do that, restoring that trust, I think that's big. Celebrate yourself every time you keep your promise, stay committed, and you'll be amazed at what a few months of this can do. So I really like this, spoke to me a lot, because it is true that lots of times we feel like a New Year's resolution or even an intention has to be this big thing that we reach for. And while I do think that sometimes setting something that is a far reach can help you get further, there are times when that might not be appropriate. And when you're doing this for yourself, I think understanding what we are capable of and how our brain changes, that our brain, yes, is plastic and can change, but that it needs little by little and is not just going to be from one day to the next. You're not going to be a different person. I think that is really important to keep in mind.
And how easier would it be to practice self-compassion if you miss a little thing versus a big thing? Because it's like, oh, I only drank 2 waters today. Well, I just thought about it. Let me drink another one. Tomorrow, I'm going to do 3. The next day, I'm going to do 4. Which, you've seen that so many times. Great thing. And we do that for work, but we don't do it for ourselves, right? We take our big task and break it up into little pieces,
right,
but we don't apply that same thing to our personal lives sometimes. So with that being said, we hope you enjoyed our context. Let's get ready to have some good conversations. What are your New Year's resolutions or intentions? And have you kept your New Year's resolutions so far?
So remember, you can raise your hand or put it in the chat. I can go ahead and start. I haven't set any intentions yet this year, but also this is another thing, a little bit of self-compassion. I know I just haven't had time to be super mindful yet. Little kids and all that stuff. So I am going to be really self-compassionate with myself and say, you have time. You don't have to do it on the 31st or the 1st. I still want to, because I do think I did go through a bit of a phase of like, oh, setting goals is not healthy because, whatever was going on in my mind at that moment. But I do think that I'm at a place now where I can set a good intention, have some resolutions or goals that are attainable, and that I still have time to do it. How about you, Alexandra?
I have not made it yet to personal and intentions as well, or resolutions. I'm like not so with the resolutions because I know I break them. So I've been trying to do this is what I want to manifest for the year. But I've only set work manifestations. So I'm gonna wait for this weekend because I didn't get a chance to do, my vision board or some of the practices that I like to do. So yeah, but I did have one floating in my mind and I fell off the next day. And probably because it was way too big. It was a way too big thing. Oh, I'm gonna, by the end of the month, I would have lost, 10 pounds and blah, 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 which isn't even really realistic. 8 pounds, I think, because they say 1 to 2 pounds a week. And yeah, all of that went out the window when my aunt brought sweet potato pie over here. So I was like, okay, let's go back to something else and figure out. And, I know I always work better too, when it comes to weight loss goals and stuff like that. The times that I have, lost a lot amount of weight, which at one time I lost about 30 pounds. I had an accountability partner. And I worked so much better because, and this is probably not a good thing now that we're talking about this, I have to make it self-compassion, but I don't want to let someone else down. So I'm more likely to show up because I don't want to let them down versus the thoughts that I have for myself, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm tired. It was a long day at work. I'll do it tomorrow. But when I have someone to help keep me focused, or even to encourage me when I fall off, which I guess would be a level of self-compassion, I tend to like actually stick with it. Anybody else?
Yeah, we want to hear. All right, we've got, sorry, Elizabeth, there we go. Elizabeth says, trying to eat better and work out, have done better, but I have not been 100%. I have forgave myself because this week is my birthday. After my birthday this Friday, I will be better. I am working on a vision board to put in my workout room, listing mom workout on the board. My 12-year-old daughter is holding me accountable. That is great. Yeah, and
Definitely.
it's your birthday. That self-compassion, that give yourself a little leeway. It's not a linear thing, is it?
Yep. And happy birthday.
And happy
And
birthday.
Karen said happy birthday in the comments. Anyone
Yeah,
else
thank
want
you
to
for
share their
sharing.
experience? And you don't have to type in the chat. You can raise your hand and join us and speak.
I love sharing like this, resolutions and intentions, because the examples, they may not be applicable to like myself, but they do give me really good ideas. And I think it's a really powerful tool to kind of talk about it in a group. And I know that especially with the surge of COVID again, sometimes it's harder to get together with people. So we want to hear more.
Yeah, but Elizabeth, those preteens and teenagers, boy, keep you accountable. I have 15-year-old twins, and they'll be like, "Mommy, you said that you were going to such and such and such." Lacey said less screen time for my kids and I both, more time doing things together. Yes, definitely. That's a great one.
Continuing with journaling.
Thank you, Lynn. Say cool. Yeah, that's something that I have to pick up. Like my journaling has just become me writing poetry, and that's not really the same. Like that's what I do consistently, but not journaling. But during the break, my daughters went to there's a place called Carytown here in Richmond. It's like our little baby version of Georgetown or whatever. And so they went, and my daughter bought her a self-care journal. I had such a proud mommy moment that she even had that thought. It's like, Mommy, we bought these crystals and we bought this self-care journal. And at first, one twin was like, we bought it for you. And she was like, no, I didn't buy it for Mommy. This is mine. They only have one. You can go back. I was like, oh, okay. You get me excited for no reason.
That's
Deanna
great,
said,
though. I mean, just as a reflection on kind of modeling for them as well.
and leading too, and a child should lead them because a lot of times they are the biggest accountability partners that I have. Like,
right.
oh gosh, let me get you inspire me. Deanna says my resolution is to take care of myself as much as I take care of others. I have a lot of life goals, and sometimes I put them aside because someone else needs me for something. I'm going to be intentional with my time to work on my goals. Oh my goodness! If you just didn't speak my life. Yeah, the self-sacrifice, right? My dad has this saying that I've been thinking about a lot where he says, don't sink your boat trying to float someone else's. And I have to constantly remind myself, don't sink your boat trying to float someone else's. So
Lenora, learning the new technology for cell phones and laptops.
Terrence had better attitude towards life and people. Yeah, that was one of mine last year. I was getting caught in a negative loophole. And it's amazing how people may not change. They may still do the same things that you don't like. But when you're not constantly focused and talking and obsessing, right? Back to the obsessing, somehow they either just, it almost like you don't even pay attention to it anymore. It's the weirdest thing, but like, and the more it's almost like, the universe, God says, oh, this what you want? You want, so let me give you more things to talk and obsess and be negative about, and so shifting that focus and having a better attitude is amazing. And then sometimes, I don't know if this is real, Taryn, but you have to tell me, like, sometimes it feels like the people, like, again, I don't know if they've really changed or if the things just don't affect you as much. I don't know.
Or both.
Yeah, right. It's probably a both and. I think we can go to the next slide, Andrew. Yeah. What has been your experiences in sticking to your goals for the new year? Any takers?
Well, I have not, like I said, set those intentions yet, but I think kind of subconsciously I have. And we had a really good break. Be Strong closes offices between Christmas and New Year's. And so I was able to spend a lot of time with my family. And one thing I did was to cook a lot of things from scratch, cook and bake. And that helps me be healthier. So instead of the intention being, I want to be healthier, I'm going to focus on those steps of I'm going to cook a new recipe once a week or something like that. And that's something that I've so far been able to stick to without even really having set that. And I really, it makes me happy.
Oh, we have
Stephen,
Stephen. Come on
Stephen,
and join us.
Hey, howdy,
Stephen
y'all.
just, hi, Stephen. I'm interested because I just, in my mind, you stick to all of your resolutions because you're so healthy and fit. So,
Oh no, I'm gonna disappoint you, Alexandra. I just have like a bunch of kind of meandering thoughts. I really identified with this concept of not calling them resolutions. I haven't liked the idea of a New Year's resolution for a while, and I don't think I could have ever, or I never explicitly, I think, reasoned with it as them being attached to negative connotations. But I've definitely felt it, so I really like this idea of calling them New Year's intentions. And then I've done a couple things, although admittedly I did start Monday. It's tough to start on a weekend. I don't know if anyone else feels the same way. But just being a little bit more mindful, cleaning up my apartment has been a big one, and doing kind of small cleanings as opposed to like waiting to the end of the week or end of the month to do a more thorough cleaning. I've been really focusing on my environment, and similarly, because working from home, I spend a lot of time here, so I have to create an environment that works for me. I've had artwork that I haven't put up that I've had, I've been in this apartment for a year and a half, and it's still lacking on wall art. I have like 2 things hung up. So I bought frames. I have a couple pieces that I'm going to get framed and put up. I'm going to do it myself. So getting my environment to kind of work for me, since I'm spending so much time here, is something I'm doing, and I'm in the process along with cleaning to make my environment work for me.
yeah, I like that. And it makes such a big difference, the artwork on the wall versus the blank wall. You don't think it makes a difference until you do it. Like for a long time, I was like, oh my God, why? Because after you move, it's kind of like, I'm here now. I just need a break before I put everything back. But then I started to look around and be like, okay, I really look like I'm living in a dorm or something. Like, this is ridiculous. Let me try to make it beautiful so I can have some type of sense of like my environment is peaceful and bringing me joy.
yeah. And that also, that's what we talk about with the environmental vitality as one of our 6 domains of vitality. And we know those are all so connected. So thank you for sharing, Stephen.
And Lynn said, I often stick to intentions better by not calling them goals. Agreed. I make adjustments to my life and mindfully decide on a day-to-day alignment with the new adjustments. Oh my goodness, I love that, Lynn. And then Stephen said that he forgot to mention, I brought string lights and a lamp and I'm obsessed with them. I turn on each day. Oh yes, my daughters, like I have so many string lights and the ones that change colors. And I was basically like, oh, I want that in my room because it just creates a whole vibe, like a whole atmosphere.
It's like another thing to kind of go back to, like when we were talking about the word, having something like that you enjoy a lot kind of helps you come back and be mindful. And then Elizabeth had also said that she doesn't usually make resolutions. This is something she did with her daughter, so it was something new.
Definitely. So next slide.
Okay, how do you think self-compassion can help you achieve your goals?
I think the biggest thing, learning from the information that we put together, and in my conversations with our colleague Robin, because she's really focused on self-compassion, is that just simply the ability to forgive yourself. And I think if you do it with goals, you can then do it with bigger things. So I think that's one of the ways that it can help you achieve your intentions or your goals, is to just practice self-forgiveness, right? And starting all over again. Andrew said, wanted to chime in on the light thing. We had a giant Christmas star called Parole, and that is the best room light that I've ever seen. It's staying up all year round.
Nice.
Wow, that's neat. You'll have to like send me the link to what that looks like, Andrew. Anyone else? What about you? I mean, we've kind of said it in that context.
Yeah, but I think it's just such an important element in setting intentions. So you can't, I mean, you can, but we're human, we're imperfect, we're vulnerable, right? So self-compassion is a necessary ingredient because we won't do it in a linear fashion. We will fall off the bandwagon at some point. And so it's our ability to get back up and back on it to keep going. And I think without self-compassion, you kind of just say, oh, you know, I wasn't able to do it and I'm worthless, so I'm not going to keep going. But when you have self-compassion, you can continue. And also just the power of language here when we're talking about intentions versus resolutions versus even goals. Like, I feel like for me personally, up until recently, goals were a positive thing. And then I kind of started thinking about it a little bit different, and goals went into the resolution category, having a negative connotation. And I love the word intention. I feel like there's probably some more words that would resonate about these kind of things. And I think that this went off the topic of self-compassion, but I just wanted to point out there that language is important for self-compassion too, because it's the language we use with ourselves.
I agree. So Stephen was like, this reminds me of a webinar from earlier last year centered around addiction, and expecting perfection can be an unrealistic goal. We actually even touched on this early today, but focusing on improvement and supports to help us make progress towards our ultimate objective. And then he said, holy cow, that thing is incredible, Andrew. Andrew put the
I'm gonna have to check it out. I love that you made that point, Stephen, about addiction, because so Be Strong Families, for those of you who don't know, we do have a training called Recovering. We do cafes called Recovering Together cafes, and a training about them. And this is something new to me that I've been learning about, and just learning about addiction and self-compassion and person first language type things. This has really helped me with myself as well, because it's really created a new framework of how to think about things like addiction, very negative connotation, talking about it with different words. And so lots of the people we may be working with, you know, their intention may be to get clean or to stay clean. And so we'll talk about that a lot. And those things really have transferred into my mind. And we talk about it as a group, the trainers, we talk about these things a lot. We send articles to each other. And Robin, our director of training, who we've talked about, she is always educating us about these things. And I think that it's very similar to this intention making and being compassionate with ourselves and looking at it through a different lens of non-judgmentalness.
Yeah, and realizing that the connection I made with that and what Andrew said, you know, because in a previous job, I did co-parenting classes for drug court, and they wouldn't let us do the parenting classes to the participants have reached a certain level, because we know that addiction now has an effect on the brain. And so they're like, till they've detoxed to a certain level, they can't even hear you. And it's not that they don't have compassion or want to have relationship, but they literally, physically, mentally cannot do it until they've reached a certain level. So we were at the end of the program, and of course it was really great. But when they tried to put the program early up, before they had taken them through the other steps around really explaining what happens to the brain and addiction, et cetera, it wouldn't have been successful. And so I thought about the piece from the Instagram post about how the brain works, or for all of our professionals on here, we know what happens with, you know, trauma. At the point of trauma, the left and right brain stop speaking to each other. So you have to have these practices to make them back cohesive again. And so I think all of that applies, it's addiction, it's weight loss, it's falling off, it's this, it's that. How do you look at, again, those tiny, tiny steps? So your brain isn't like, oh my God, you're freaking me out right now. We're not going to do this. And I thought about one of my intentions that I've done when I lost my big 30 pounds, maybe about 4 years ago. And I've been able to keep it down, but I've never gone to where I want to go. And go ahead, Andrew. But one of the things that I did was push away. When I'm full, and I continuously have practiced that, when I'm full, I just stop. And I only eat dessert when my aunt brings the sweet potato pie, which is only twice a year, right? Thanksgiving and Christmas. Other than that, I don't eat dessert. I save those calories for wine, just to be honest. But I can't, but if I was doing both, I probably wouldn't have maintained. But it was slow and it was easy for me to just, I'm full, I'm going to stop. And that's been the way to maintain it, not through exercise, that and drinking water.
So you could almost say your intention was, I'm going to stop when I'm full instead of I'm going to lose weight.
Yeah, basically.
I think one thing I'm going to do when I finally sit down to think about my intentions more deeply is write them or whatever, and then take it down and not like find the halfway point and make that, and kind of it's a step / cutting it in half, because I hadn't really thought about this making it more attainable kind of thing.
And it's something you do very well every day in work.
I
always, you do it so well. And that's the thing. We don't apply our work processes and structures to our lives. Like, we make strategic plans, right, for organizations, but we never make strategic plans for ourselves or for our families. How can mindfulness in general and the 5 steps help you stay the course? Any takers?
So Andrew's going to remind us of the 5 steps that we talked about on an earlier slide. I think the first one was like the why of it.
Yes, like your intentions, being clear about your intentions.
Process, not results.
Process, not results. I think that's where that stopping when I'm full thing, I can definitely relate that. Changing your habit loop.
Little things over and over. Like, if you can do a tiny thing over and over.
Yep. Be kind to yourself, and then consider resolution alternatives, like the word for the year. So I think for me, that is the main one that was very new to me, which was having a word for a year to refocus my mind. That's the one I think that's going to help me stay the course when I set all of my professional and personal intentions. I'm going to use that word. And every time I veer to the left, use the word to bring it back to center.
I'm going to try the digital board that you were talking about. I remember you had mentioned that before, and I had totally forgotten about it. And so I'm so glad we're doing this, because I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Oh, wait, she told me about that already. So I'm definitely going to do that, because I don't have a lot of materials at home to make a vision board physically, even though I kind of like that idea of doing something with my hands. But just to keep the mess down, I'm going to definitely try this digital vision board as an alternative and see what comes from it. Because I feel like once you make it, you can kind of see like themes, right? I imagine. And then I can say, that's important to me. And how can I work on that in steps?
And, you have toddlers. So it's kind of like, I'm not adding on to the crafts, and I think that's
that's what I'm thinking.
But it's still fun, and it's still tactile, because you get the pictures from Google, which makes it easier than the magazines. You can get anything, and you still have to play around with it and organize it.
Yeah.
And it's not
so it's still a little bit tactile. Okay.
And creative.
I like it.
Creative.
I'm going to do that.
Well, let's go to the next. I think we have another set of questions.
Oh, and Andrew would like to speak.
I don't have a raise hand function as tech support, unfortunately. But I did want to say that looking at the 5 steps, I'm just kind of thinking from my own situation. So I broke my foot back in November, and the recovery process for that has been very difficult. But at the same time, it's kind of something where I'm like, okay, you broke your foot. You are going to not be in the healthiest situation of your life because you literally can't walk around. And that is allowing me to kind of set intentions that I'm being nicer to myself while thinking about long-term results. So instead of being like, okay, broke my foot, I want to lose X amount of weight, it's becoming more of like, okay, well, I want to wake up in the morning not feeling bloated. And that can be a lot of different things where maybe it's, if I'm having something to drink the night before, I end the night with a couple glasses of water, so that helps with the not feeling bloated. But also just, going on walks more regularly. I've currently just got out of my boot and I found out that I don't know how to walk normally anymore. Normally being, I just kind of walk around with a huge limp, and it's like, okay, well, this is a challenge. And that's a good resolution for 2022 is to get back to being able to walk like I used to. But I like the idea of approaching this kind of challenge with different end results in mind that aren't like lose 20 pounds, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely, because you're gonna have to take it step by step, right? And then I always use this. My dad and parents like are just the parable axiom, king and queen. And so there's this another one that I'm gonna share that he says when you want to build something big, he said you just start off walking one step. Next thing you know, you're walking a little faster. Then after you're walking a little faster, then you're running. But if you start trying to run first, you're not gonna build something that lasts. And that's what made me think about the physical way that you have to rebuild your walking is the same thing about this staying the course and changing that habit loop and doing these small things every day to actually change that habit loop. I think we're 153. So I think we have another slide.
What other techniques you use? What are other techniques you use to achieve your New Year's intentions? And what has the process of keeping and or breaking your New Year's resolutions taught you about yourself? I like that last question.
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
All, some people will say something in the chat. And you can answer because of time either question in the chat. I'm gonna go with number 2. I like number 2. In general, not just New Year's resolutions or intentions, but just anytime being a recovering perfectionist and still in recovery of being a perfectionist, I can be hard on myself. And that process of failing and starting and failing and starting has actually what I perceive sometimes as failing. And then my friends and colleagues are like, what are you talking about? Actually makes me think about my inner strength. It's actually built my inner strength. So beyond the compassion and all of that, it's like, dude, you're strong. You've had these things that you consider so life altering. And this is outside of work. This is just like life altering. And I'm still here. And I'm still trying to find a way to be positive and happy, even though I have my moments. Okay, Lynn says, use visuals. One I use is putting positive sayings on my mirror. That's nice. One of my friends does this. She has sticky notes everywhere, and she doesn't even care about you being a visitor. They're in her bathroom, they're in her room, they're on the refrigerator. It's just like Post-its everywhere. But I see why, because you're like, oh, you can't help but feel a certain way.
That is powerful.
And then
Andrew says, for question number 2, I found that breaking my resolutions has led to outcomes that I never could have foreseen, but I'm grateful for the outcome. An example would be my resolutions for 2020 kind of all fell apart in March, but the way that I grew personally and professionally in that year, I consider to be fundamental to who I am now as a person. That is, and I wanted to say something because that's a little bit similar to what Alexandra said, because you can't foresee some things that happen in life. Although we know certain things will happen that we may not want to think about, those things happen, and we can either continue on our journey or take a different path, or, take a path that maybe we don't want to take. So it's kind of like having that flexibility. And I think that the mindfulness and self-compassion are 2 important ingredients in being flexible enough to be able to roll with those punches.
Yeah, and Elizabeth says, number 3 in the steps, it takes a long time to break a habit, forgive and start again. till you break the habit, and celebrate when you get it done. Yeah, we didn't think about that.
Celebrate.
That was celebrate the small successes. I had a colleague who used to always say that, like, celebrate the small. Tracy Taylor's her name, and we would be so overwhelmed. You know, any of my nonprofit colleagues on here, you know, nonprofit life can be rough. And she was like, dude, if you keep thinking on the stuff that's so far, you got to celebrate each success for each day, which made the work environment so much better. If you have any more comments, just go ahead and keep putting it on. We're in 157. Next slide, Andrew. Want you to put in, we have Amplify Self-Compassion. You can put in your hashtag Amplify within the chat. What do you want to amplify? Andrew put hashtag Amplify Intentions. And maybe that's an interesting word too, beyond intentions or manifestations. I'm going to create my amplifications for the year. That was the MC coming out.
Right, and we do have that cool calendar as well.
Yep, exactly.
Amplify calendar.
So put in your Amplify. What do you want to hashtag? And go to the next slide. And Jen?
All right, sorry, I was working on my Amplify.
Amplify for progress and love.
So our upcoming webinars, we have this week, tomorrow, it's in Spanish, Haciendo el mejor pedido al universo para el 2022 with Sarah Gonzalez. And on Friday, we have a Taste of Cafes each Friday. And if you check back to our events page on our website, we'll have more posted for next week. And we hope to see you all there. Invite your friends.
And it's Elizabeth says hashtag Amplify Vision Board. I did a hashtag Amplify Small Steps. Next slide. Yamuna, I'm so sorry if I mess your name up. Amplify Giving Myself Grace. Oh my gosh, I love that one.
That's great.
I really love that. And so you've probably been hearing about our Not Cafe. It's a game. It's super fun. It's called Questionable Curious Conversations for Endless Fun. We had our lunch party back in December. People have been playing it over the holidays. Please check it out. It's really something great to do with your families, with your teenage kids, with families at the get-togethers, or just even your nuclear family or friends. Really cool, fun questions. So please check out, he's put the link in there for our game Questionable. And next slide. Subscribe to our YouTube. It has all of our English and Spanish webinars. You can backtrack. We've been doing this since the pandemic began in March. There are a lot of guests. There's a lot of information. Check us out, and also make sure you really hit that subscribe button so we can get our subscriptions up on YouTube. And with that being said, thank you, everyone. We enjoyed this time. We hope you enjoyed it as well.